Welcome back to the VET S.O.S podcast. Remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that VET S.O.S lifeline. We're here to help. And today we're sitting down with Leah Stiles, retired Navy senior chief and founder of SeaWaves. This organization tackles a topic that impacts so many, especially once they get out of the military. This is going to be a great conversation. So get out your pen, your paper, get out your iPad if you in the tech space or something to jot it down, whatever you do, because these notes is going to take you to the next level. And I'm sitting down here with my partner, my buddy in crime, my ace for today, because Sean is out there probably getting a great January tan, so
I mean, he's in Jacksonville. He probably is.
Keith, how you doing today, brother?
I'm living the dream. I mean, it's pretty kind of warm right now in Virginia Beach for this time of year. So it's almost 70 degrees today. Not sunny though, so I ain't getting no tan. So, but no, it's great to be here, Kings. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, man. We just spoke about earlier. I stood outside. I got grounded. I stood on that grass without it's a little bit chilly outside, but without no socks and nothing on. So I'm charged up. I'm ready to go to Leah. So I said, be prepared, because this energy, I'm about to transfer it through the. So Leah is a retired U.S. Navy senior chief, petty officer, and founder of SeaWaves, the nation's first and only nonprofit exclusively dedicated to addressing eating disorders within the military and veteran community. After a 20-year career in military public affairs, Leah now leads national efforts focused on education, advocacy, and prevention, and access to care through culinary-informed resources and referral pathways designed specifically for military life. Through SeaWaves, Leah combines evidence-based education and deeply personal storytelling to foster connection, shift culture, and drive meaningful change. But wait, there's more. She is also the author of the upcoming book, Battle Scars and Body Wars, a personal and professional journey shining a light on eating disorders in the military. How you doing today, Leah? Greetings.
Greetings. I am in sunny Orlando, Florida. I
Oh, okay.
think we're going to see the 80s today. So warm and sunny, I'm going to feel today.
A little bit jelly. Just a little bit jelly, but yeah.
Come visit.
I don't know. Oh, it gets too hot. I was stationed in Fort Benning back in the day, and we even did quite a few TDYs. Well, you guys say TADs, but yeah, I did a few down in Florida. It was always too daggum hot. I know. I'm from the north, so. But anyway, enough about that. So Leah, before we get into SeaWaves and stuff, tell us a little bit about your transition out of the military. What was that like?
Oh, that was interesting. So interesting enough, my husband and I actually retired the very same day.
Nice.
We met in A school, so training right after boot camp. And while we were waiting to class up, he kept trying to get my number, and I was trying to focus on my military career. And then on the day that we classed up, our first day of actual school, that morning was 9/11. And,
Oh, wow.
he wrapped his arms around me and he gave me a hug, and I have never felt a hug like that. So I looked at him and I was like, if we live through this, I'll give you a shot. I'll give you a shot. And so we did. We lived through it, obviously. I gave him a shot, been married all these years, but we lined it up to our retirement being the same day. That day we left, Chesapeake, Virginia, moved down here to Florida. We passed the torch to our son, who's active duty Navy now. And I came down here with a completely different plan. I was obsessed with wanting to do public affairs at Disney World. And I applied relentlessly. That's what I thought my plan was. But funny thing, during COVID, they were firing and not hiring. So I didn't have a shot. And that left so much confusion. Just thought my plan was my plan, and it wasn't my plan. And he's retiring at the same time, and we're empty nesting. We're down to just one little person who's now, graduating high school and pretty much is just a cool roommate at this point.
I love it. That's awesome. So, and I can only imagine both getting out. I mean, transition's hard enough or scary enough even, and you are both doing it at the same exact time. Like I know, like, yeah, you know, my wife wasn't military, so I leaned on her a lot during the transition. I can only imagine, like, you're both are going through it. That's and during COVID, nonetheless, that's even more crazy. Like, you joined 9/11 and then got out of COVID. Like, you bookended that one real well. So you get out and the Disney thing doesn't really come through. So how does SeaWaves come into existence?
So I had always wished that something like SeaWaves existed. I just always wish somebody else, would do it or, had an idea. And, honestly, my earliest years in serving, I was looking for something like this, and other people I knew were looking for something like this. And then as I grew in my leadership and, became more of a leader, I really was able to assess the resource gaps, the knowledge gaps, not only as a leader, but through my lived experience of having an eating disorder for 30 years. Um, and towards the end of my career, I almost died a couple times. And
Mm.
so I thought, if I, as a senior leader and somebody with a very strong network, was unable to access life-saving care, who else? And, what else? And as I mentioned, I'd pass the torch to my son, and now I'm also a Navy mom. And so, yeah, I started doing research, and I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what it was. Um, I did not have found a nonprofit on my bingo card, but suddenly there it was.
That's incredible. Um, so tell us about, like, what the organization does. Like, what's the? I mean, you kind of hit the purpose, but tell us a little bit more about it and the process of it all.
Sure. So, SeaWaves were almost 3 years old, and we're growing really fast, and we're, ever changing and growing, because what we're really trying to do is find the gaps and fill the gaps, fill immediate needs while simultaneously fixing longer systematic issues. So usually the first question is, why sea waves? Is it because you're a nautical Navy person? Answer is partially because I love all things nautical. And also in the Navy, we love acronyms. So SeaWaves is actually an acronym, and each letter tells you exactly what we do. So it's support, education, awareness, wellness, advocacy, and validation for eating disorders and suicide prevention.
That is a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you think, Kings?
Wow, because I was just looking at the picture in the background. I was gonna ask you, like, what made you come up with the lighthouse with the because I've been around the water a little bit, but not as intense. So my water consisted of concrete and traffic lights, and that was my water. But looking at the lighthouse and definitely in the VET S.O.S space, that's when we say don't drown in the sea of transition. So now I'm thinking about that, and that lighthouse is huge because when the ship is in the middle of and it's pitch dark and no navigation, that all the systems are gone, like they're in a running thing, and they look for that lighthouse and they head towards that lighthouse. So I just want to say thank you for coming. I was going to ask you, how did you come up with that I
Logo?
don't even know what to call it, Keeper.
Yeah.
The symbol or the picture. How did you
The
say? You know what?
brand.
There you go. Yes.
So
How
the
did that come around?
logo was actually made by one of my former sailors. So shout out to mass communications specialist Kristen Yarber. And, she put so much thought into it. Like every spoke in the lighthouse represents a year of my service or a different eating disorder in the waves. And like she put so much thought into it through the logo. But yeah, the lighthouse is so symbolic. shining a light on something that's taboo, right? There's stigma, there's taboo. It's in the dark, right? It's also shining a light for those that are still in the dark. Let them know that we're here. I have this saying that I say a lot, and when it's written, I say it in two different punctuations. So the first one is need a light, question mark, be a light. So if you need a light, try to be who you needed when you were in the dark. If you needed a good, brother, be a brother. If you needed a good leader, be a good leader. Be that. And then, you'd be surprised while you're shining a light for others, how it actually, when you stop for a moment, you realize it's lighting your path. It is lighting your path. And that's what launching SeaWaves did for me. And my lost transition was I I created something I felt others needed, and it gave me my purpose each and every day to keep going and keep working. But I also say need a light, be a light with a semicolon in the middle. And we know the semicolon means your story doesn't end here. And before I retired, I was inpatient in an eating disorder hospital, living off a NG tube up my nose and just bedridden on a NG tube when they came and offered me palliative care. And, they thought that assisted suicide might be a good option for me. And it just occurred to me that I didn't go through all this to get here. And my story doesn't end here. So that was like my darkest day, my semicolon moment of my story doesn't end here, and then be a light. And that allowed me to really shift my darkness.
Wow. And yeah, and your story's so incredibly powerful. In fact, I think in a little bit, I want you to share even more about that. But for the listeners, like I know when I first saw this episode come up on the schedule, and I'm like, I never even like 22 years in the army, and we have the weight standards, and I struggled with that a lot throughout my career, and I'm like, it never even dawned on me that this is probably something fairly prevalent across the force, but you don't hear about it. Not like you do PTSD, TBIs, even like substance abuses and things of that nature. So I'm curious, like what sort of studies or statistics are out there that you can share that might shed light on just how prevalent this problem might be.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We don't hear about it. We hear a lot about PTSD, and actually eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of all mental illnesses, so higher than PTSD.
Wow.
And the number one cause of death for somebody with an eating disorder is suicide. So it is appalling to think that in all of our suicide prevention efforts for our military and veteran community, rarely is this brought to the table. And that's one of the things I work on. So studies show us that one third of females and one fifth of males are struggling with the eating disorder. That doesn't
Mm.
mean that they've been diagnosed. We have lots of barriers to getting an actual diagnosis, such as there's no standard screening in place, right? At your yearly health exam, even if you go to behavioral health and you ask for an eating disorder screening, you may get deer in the headlights kind of look. We don't have a lot of qualified providers to identify, eating disorders and what they really look like. There's so much stigma that makes us think that we know what they look like from the 80s or 90s, the Lifetime channel, or, talk show hosts that, we thought that they were, young, adolescent, blonde females. That's not the case whatsoever. So there's so many barriers to the care. And yet from 2017 to 2021, we saw reporting of eating disorders go up 79% in active duty. That was
Whoa.
2021.
Yeah. And what do you think drove that? Was it just we started actually tracking the statistic that drove that number up, or what drove that number?
More studies are being done. There's one going on right now for active duty women. And let me be clear that it doesn't only impact women, right? One third of females, one fifth of males. But yes, more studies, more data happening. That's the V in validation. It became so clear to me in advocacy that leadership decision makers need to know how this is impacting readiness, how this is impacting our suicide numbers, how this is impacting our military families. Because even spouses and children, military spouses and children, are 3 times more likely than our civilian counterparts to have an eating disorder.
That's insane. And so you mentioned, leadership needs to be educated. Like, so, I mean, for those out there listening, some folks are still active duty, and definitely, I'm sure some of them are in leadership. Like, what do you want leaders to know? What can they do to be more aware of this, to be more, what's the word I'm looking for, to catch it before it's too late kind of thing?
Yeah, so a couple things. First, I'll plug our training program, the E for Education. I developed a program called MEDAL. It's Military Eating Disorder Awareness and Literacy, and it's 2 hours of eating disorder 101. We don't have to, become doctors, but we want that same level of knowledge that we have of suicide prevention and PTSD. Know how to have the conversation, know how to do no harm while talking, right? And then know how to find the resources, like just tools for leadership toolboxes. So I developed that for military leadership, and then saw another really big need. So now we have that for 4 different tracks: military leadership, clinicians and providers, where they get CE credits for their 2 hours, veteran facing organizations. So people that are doing suicide prevention or any other mental health that just don't know how to have the conversation around eating disorders, or need that basic 101 or how it impacts us. And then friends, families, and allies. So we all know somebody, whether you want to admit it or not, there is somebody in your professional or personal circle with an eating disorder. And if you want to know how to support them, we provide that too. And then perfect time to plug my book that's coming out at the end of the month. It'll be out by the time this is aired. And each chapter starts with a little, memoir story, a C story about my experience. So you kind of see how it played out in a leader, somebody that was a go-getter, and, really appeared from the outside to be extremely driven and work ethic, and internally dealing with something that almost killed me because of the silence around it. So my story, the book starts with a little bit of a C story, but then it goes into all of this data that we're talking about: how to find it, how to identify it, how to talk about it. And then each chapter ends on another tool that you could add to your toolbox, whether it's podcasts, more books, another website, another resource, a support group. So I really loaded this book with, tools for everybody. And I like tools to be like a buffet, right? Like, they're there. Maybe you need them now. Maybe you know somebody else that needs them. Maybe you just want to know and you can come back to it later.
That's incredible. And yeah, I love just the outreach, because I mean, this is, again, I had never even thought of something like this. So, you're kind of doing all this from scratch. There's not really a formula or a format or a structure to follow. Like, you're just kind of blazing a new trail, which is awesome. So you mentioned something earlier that I kind of wanted, if you could dive into. So I found it unique, because if I'm not mistaken, like, you attest that this tends to stem from PTSD, right? It's almost like not a symptom, but PTSD can cause these disorders, if I'm not mistaken, and if that's correct. And so I was just kind of curious, like, you're kind of nodding, so I'm like, maybe I'm wrong, but is there a correlation between something that may have happened traumatically early on in life, or earlier on in life, that then developed as one of these disorders?
Yes. So that normally a long answer. I'm going to
Okay.
consolidate it. So there are so many factors that can contribute to
Mm.
developing an eating disorder. Trauma is a factor that we see very, very often. So there are genetic factors, environmental factors, physiological factors, intentional weight loss. The pursuit of intentional weight loss is the number one factor. So if you're intentionally having to shrink your body to meet standards, or because diet culture, or any of those other things. So you do all these things. Leaving home is a big trigger. We see this a lot in college students on the civilian side. Doesn't it make sense for young people going going to boot camp, leaving their support system and haven't quite developed all of those coping skills, go to a place where there's a lot of attention on body size and now a whole new world. My first day of training is a whole world trauma, right? And all these factors contribute. So it is, the military becomes unintentionally a breeding ground for this, and then the stigma unintentionally masks it a lot, right? Like when I was just on a random Wednesday afternoon going out to run 13 miles, and the natural reaction is somebody to say, "Wow, you're so disciplined. I want to do that. I wish I would just go run a half marathon." And I just remember finally one day I just snapped and I looked and I was like, I don't run because I enjoy it or because, it's discipline. I had to go run 13 miles because I felt obligated to eat a piece of pizza with you guys. And that's my punishment. That's not fun for me. And so the stuff that just kind of like on the surface looks great and determination and discipline, may not be what it looks like.
No, absolutely. What you think, Case?
I can't believe that you and I are on the same path. And keep and this is what I mean by that. And Leah, like, correct me if I'm wrong. When you share your story and now you have SeaWaves out there, because you said that you had to establish something because nothing was out there. And you had to do it because you knew 1 out of 3 and 1 out of 5 are going through this challenge by themselves and they're keeping quiet. So I definitely know about the mental health space while being, I called it when I was in the pen. I called, being in the pen, every 30 days get reevaluated, see if you could get released. And definitely when I was young in the military is, man, I gotta make weight. Man, I gotta wrap the saran table. Man, I gotta put the icy hot on. Man, I gotta go sit in the sauna with the sweatsuit and sit there. And like you said, Leah, man, if I have this burger, I gotta go run 50. I gotta work out 4 hours. And you wanna be looking good in that uniform. You wanna be ready to go out and be active, right, Keith? Like you wanna be green all the way down, right? You don't wanna be red or nothing on IMR. You wanna be green, so I gotta do what I gotta do, right? I'm gonna figure it out. In the long term, it hurts because you're damaging on the inside. And Seaways by those acronyms, I say, wow, this is huge because I shared with Keith over 46,000, and that number is baffling to me. Over 46,000 VSOs nonprofit that's out there to assist the military community. And you said you are the first one that's like, you know what, I need to. So one, and how many people that you affected by saving their lives, by sharing your story, one, by writing in the book. So, I'm going to put the plug in for the scoop because I'm going to need you to come on the scoop so we could deep dive into that book, because I know how important it is for others to hear the story that somebody made it through their dark spot, that somebody made it through their transition. But somebody said, hey, I don't know how you got to VET S.O.S podcast, how if you reached out or if Sean reached out or if Keith reached out, we said, I need to go and vocalize this because this is how important it is to me and how important it is to the community. So let me get in where I fit in because I know for a fact it's going to help others. Because if I was dealing with this and I retired as a senior chief, and I'm sure you probably started when you was I don't know what it is in the Navy, like a C what's like an E2 or E3. I don't know. I know in the Air Force is an airman, right? I don't know what it is in the C terms, but
We're
just going
we're
through the
seamen.
ranks. Right, going through the ranks And now all you think like, man, I got to make it to the next rank. I got to make, I have to make rank because I want a better life. I want a better, so I have to mask it. I have to pack it in a little bit more. I have to keep moving forward. I can't show, I got to keep the face. We all, especially about being a senior non-commissioned officer in the military, you have younger people looking up to you. You can't share what you're dealing with because you don't want to, and that's, I'm just speaking, that's how I was coming through the military, right? The higher up you go, the less you could show. Now I know it's different, the less you could show weakness, but it's actually the strength that got you through to help others. So all that to say is SeaWaves. Wow. Wow, 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 wow.
So,
That's it.
Kings, we met at the Military Influencers Conference,
Yes. Yeah,
and
I didn't want to say it. I wanted you to bring it up, but
hey, but let me tell you what I also learned at that same event. The new number for veteran service organizations is 72,000. There are 72,000, not 46 anymore. And so, yeah, you're right. There's so many that, people are getting lost. We're drowning in the ones, that are valid. It's hard to figure out who's doing what. But yeah, I can say with absolute certainty, nobody was exclusively, dedicated to understanding the eating disorders, specifically providing comprehensive resources for eating disorders. So yeah, definitely we needed something.
and it's not only that. I'm sorry, Q. Like this is mind blowing to me because it's not only that, Leah. Like you actually went through it. So it's not, how you get that extra validation when somebody like, look, I'm not telling you what I read. I'm not telling you what I wrote. I went through it. So I know what it's like to have a feeder tube put up my nose to forcibly put food in my body because my body needs nourishment. I know what it's like. I know what it feels like. So when you share your story and somebody that's going, especially a young veteran or a young military about to transit, or just a young person that's going through it, wow. You don't think their ears are gonna open up a little bit more? You don't think they're gonna go rush and get the book just to see, like, wow, she made it through it and she's here sharing her story and journey. So it's okay. Because when I was going through my mental health struggle, I just thought it was me. I just thought like I'm the only one that's dealing with it. But when I start to open up and share my story, you know what I heard? I heard me too. Oh, that happened to you. Oh, this is my, so I figured everybody trauma is their trauma. Nobody trauma is bigger than the others.
No. No, and you're right, and it makes it, there is stigma, there is taboo, we've come a long way in being able to talk about PTSD. I remember when I first came in, that wasn't our we thought that was the generations before us. We saw it over time, and I kept hoping that eating disorder conversation, because it is on the civilian side, military is about probably 10, 15 years behind. But you're right in the hope in identifying it, because already when you're going through a mental health issue that people can talk about, like PTSD, a little bit easier to mention. Eating disorders, some people are like, what are that? I say anorexia, and they look at me like, that's not what I think it looks like. It's not what it looks like, right? And then also, unfortunately, I went through this period in my life in 18 months where I went to 8 suicide memorials. My mother, ended her life with suicide, and my neighbor was the command master chief, the Navy command master chief that wrote the suicide prevention policy. And I discovered him in his shed hanging. And so I knew from their secrecy what is stopping us from reaching out. And I know it's hard to say. And some people don't even know that it is an eating disorder that is like paralyzing them. They haven't even gotten that far to have a title to it or to know. Most doctors don't receive more than 30 minutes of education on eating disorders either, unless that's their specialty or route that they go in. So to be struggling and also not have a specific word or a place, and unfortunately now there is an executive order that says says that eating disorders are non-compatible with military service. So if you get diagnosed, you risk getting kicked out, and now you've
Oh,
lost your
wow.
livelihood and your income. Um, Although I almost died, I ruptured my esophagus and all of the things, I received 0% disability for my eating disorder. So now I'm not getting like compensation and all these other things. And so it creates this hopeless bubble. And so more than anything, what I want to say is there is light. It might seem hopeless. You might feel like you said you're the only one. You are not. And there are options and support and resources.
Wow. Yeah. First of all, we're coming up on time, so I just got to throw that out there. But I almost don't want to wrap this up. But I mean, there's so much truth, and thank you for sharing even just the other things that you did just now, like the the what's the word I'm looking for? The not widespread, but just how prevalent it is. Um, you even got me thinking. I totally like hadn't thought about this in years, but I was a wrestler for 10 years, and that's you best believe I probably had a diagnosable disorder back then. So,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I've lived that life and didn't even quite realize it. It's there's silence and shame. I totally get that, but I think there's also I didn't back then. I wouldn't have even thought that I probably did. I'm just trying to make weight, like King said earlier, right? Just trying to do what you got to do to make that weight. Um, but before we wrap this completely up, I do have one more question because again, you are blazing a trail, right? It's in this niche, if you will, of the military life, military everything. What if you could enact one change in the military, like to change the culture, the policies, whatever? What would that change be? What would you implement in the military to try to address this? And what even maybe comes from that, you think, long term?
Great question, and there's actually, 3 chapters in the book on that. Um,
Okay.
so we actually got the SERVE Act, SERVE, passed into law in 2023, and this is gonna make mandatory for military leadership to have eating disorder education. So although it's
Mm,
been passed into law, it's never been implemented, and so I'm always looking for ways to figure out the bottleneck of getting it passed law and into implementation, including, offering it, through us. So that in addition to making the screening and resources more accessible in different places. So kind of that twofold, help leadership understand, give them the tools, and then the tools would be screenings and resources.
outstanding. All right. Well, unfortunately, we do have to wrap this up. Sounds like you already have another invite back for King's show on the Scoop, which is going to be awesome. But yeah, unfortunately, we're at time. But I do have one last question before we go, which is, how do people get in touch with you? How do people sign up for this organization, these services? How do people support this organization if they feel so led to do so?
Perfect. So February is perfect. When this airs is Eating Disorder Awareness Month.
Mm,
At the end of the month is Eating Disorder Awareness Week. Follow us on our socials at SeaWaves Inc. If there's something you learned from it, the big thing I hear all the time was, I didn't know what I didn't know. Check out our socials. If you learn something, share it. If you want to get the book, get it, share it. If you want me to come train your organization or your, division, will do. sea-waves.org is a website. From there, you can go to our resource page. You can fill out an application to get support. And let me be clear that you only have to have your email so I can contact you. Everything else is optional, what you want to fill out. We have an amazing team at SeaWaves, and we're always growing, board of directors, volunteers. And so, yeah, just reach out. There's always a place for you. We always make a place.
that's awesome. Yeah. No, thank you so much for coming on the show and really educating me and all the listeners out there. I think this is definitely something that, yeah, needs to be addressed more. yeah, my mind's quasi blown. So this has been an amazing episode. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And on behalf of the entire VET S.O.S family, thank everyone for spending their time with us today. It's always great having you along for the ride. Don't forget to check out all of our other episodes, including Kingsley's The Scoop that we'll be bringing Leah back on for, and keep coming back for more stories, insights, and support from the VET S.O.S crew. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a follow, share the show, and tell a friend or two. Toss your battle buddies, fire team, shipmates, and wingmen that flotation device they need in transition, so no one drowns in that sea of transition. And as always, remember to grab the VET S.O.S life.